Today, let's talk about EQ. My goal with this video is to bring you into a pro EQ mindset when mixing. So I'm going to share with you some EQ tips that I use all the time when I EQ a signal, and also show you a very cool plugin that is not only an EQ, but a learning tool. Hey, what's going on, my friend? Chris Salim here from Mixdown Online. Let's jump right in CUBASE and look at this plugin by my good friend Björkvin Benediktsson from Audio Issues. Okay, so I'm going to leave the link down below if you want to check this EQ out. But in a nutshell, it's a very nice EQ. Clean, but it has that educational vibe to it. So I'm going to use this EQ in this video to share with you my EQ tips and also show you what this EQ is all about. So first, what you need to know, and especially if you're new to EQ, new to mixing, the important thing when it comes to EQ is to know what EQ is to begin with. And basically, EQ is simply volume knobs. Okay, so if you take a general signal, a general sound, you increase the volume or decrease the volume of a sound, that will simply bring all the frequency range up or down in volume. So an EQ is basically like having a bunch of faders in front of you that are allocated to different bands of frequencies that you can increase the volume or decrease the volume. So if we take a quick look at a graphic EQ, the one from Steinberg, you can see that you have a bunch of faders allocated and fixed to certain bands of frequencies that you can bring up or down. So this is basically what an EQ is. Now, for the most part, we are gonna tend to use parametric EQs when mixing, and those are more flexible when it comes to the band of frequencies you want to EQ or work with. And this is the one I'm going to be using, the Audio Issues EQ, which is a very, very nice EQ. And as you can tell, it has that educational vibe to it. So I'm going to go through the parameters as we go in the video. But the main thing that we get on this plugin is the vocabulary option that will add some EQ terms that we use all the time to describe the characteristic of a certain band of frequencies. That can be very useful for someone who is new to EQ, new to mixing, or for someone who just wants to learn more about EQ. And at the bottom, we have an analog type EQ with knobs, where I'm gonna get to later. Now, an important aspect of a parametric EQ like this one is to know about the different EQ shapes. On this one, we have the three main EQ shapes, which goes as follows. The first is the filter. Okay, so we have two filters on this one, a high pass filter and a low pass filter. So basically what a filter is going to do, it's going to get rid of all the frequencies below a chosen frequency. So if you set up a high pass filter to, let's say, 70 hertz, that means that this filter will get rid of everything below 70 hertz and keep everything above 70 hertz. And that will go according to the slope also. There's a slope factor, which will determine the amount or the degree of the slope taken by the filter. And you can change the slope factor right here on the top left, in this case, to go from a more smooth slope, a 6 dB per octave, to a 12 and 18 dB per octave. You can do the same also with a low pass filter, which will do the opposite, but keep the low frequencies below a certain point. In this case, let's put that to 10,000 hertz. So everything above 10,000 hertz is going to be cut off, and we'll keep everything below that point. And again, I can change the filter slope on the top right. Now, a high pass filter is also known as a low cut filter, and a low pass filter is going to be the same as a high cut filter. So this is quite cool, especially a high pass filter, to get rid of unwanted rumble that is part of the sound. Like in this case, I have this acoustic guitar sound. Okay, so I have at the bottom end of that sound some bassy rumble going on, which is not necessarily part of the core of the sound, okay? And I want to get rid of that. I don't want to keep that in my mix. Those are low frequency information that I don't need for this mix, especially on this sound. Okay, so I'm going to cut right down to maybe, 80 hertz or something. And I'm going to keep my slope to 12 dB per octave. So now I get a more cleaner sound. Okay. Now, you're going to need to use a good pair of headphones or nice studio monitors for you to be able to hear those frequencies. So I'm going to encourage you to watch this video using a good pair of headphones at least. Now, the next shape that I want to look at is the shelf, okay? And this is what we have with this one. So we have a fixed shelf band, a low shelf, and also a high shelf, which can be very useful. And this is going to be similar to a high pass or low pass filter, but instead of cutting everything below or above a certain point, it's going to just attenuate or increase all frequency above, in the case of a high shelf, the frequency point, or anything below a certain point for a low shelf filter. Okay, and again, that can be very useful. And then we have the bell shape, which you probably saw before, and this is just a good way to increase a certain band of frequencies across the whole spectrum or decrease X amount of frequencies. And within that bell curve, we can also affect different amount of frequencies by working and adjusting the Q factor, which is going to increase or decrease the wideness of the frequency band affected by this EQ band, okay, this bell curve EQ band. So for example, something I like to do and I like to start with, and this is kind of a general rule of thumb, is when I boost frequencies, when I want to enhance a sound or just add more frequencies to a sound, I'm going to tend to work with a wider Q factor. Okay, so this way I affect a bit more frequencies surrounding the frequency point. And if I want to do some subtractive EQ to correct some frequencies or just get rid of some frequencies that are making my sound a bit too muddy or boxy, I'm going to use usually a more narrow Q to bring those down, okay? And that will keep my EQ moves a bit more transparent, and for the most part will work pretty well. But even if this is a rule of thumb, it's a starting point. That doesn't mean that I am not going to use a wider Q factor when cutting frequencies or the other way around, okay? It's only a starting point, but for the most part, this is usually what I'm going to start with before making adjustments. Now, another very important aspect when it comes to EQ is to know how the different frequency ranges sounds like, so you know where you have problems to work on when it comes to mixing a sound, okay? Now, you probably saw a technique where you can find some frequencies that are problematic to your sound by just sweeping around a bell curve EQ and just look for problematic frequencies. Okay, so let's bring the reading to 30 dBs instead, and let's try it out on this acoustic guitar and look for some bad frequencies per se. Okay, now I get a lot of mud here. Oh, sounds a bit boxy. Okay, that's aggressive. So, as you can tell, if I do this type of technique to find frequencies that I should cut off, I'm going to end up cutting most of the sound. I'm going to find problematic frequencies all over the place. So this is not a technique I'm going to advise you to work with. I'm going to tell you to use your ears more than anything else to evaluate where you need to cut or where you need to boost to enhance or make your sound better. Okay, so it's important to know how each band of frequencies sounds like. And the cool thing about this EQ is you have those vocabularies on top, which is going to help you with those general EQ terms that we use all the time. So if you feel that your sound is a bit muddy or sounds a bit boxy, you know exactly, according to this EQ, you know exactly in which band of frequencies to look for and to look at. And then you can start and evaluate if this is what you actually are hearing in your head. Let me try this out on this acoustic guitar. So if I want to cut some mud, and I think this guitar is a bit muddy, I'm gonna cut down in that area. So I'll know with this EQ that the range of muddiness will be between 160 hertz to maybe 300 hertz or so. And then I'm going to go towards the boxiness range. Okay, so this is going to help me a lot to evaluate what needs to be cut off or enhanced by just looking at those terms and using my ears and how I perceive those sounds as far as the characteristics of the sounds goes. Once I know in which band of frequencies I want to make my cut, then I can just boost a bit to confirm my choice and then cut a bit. So this is something that I do on my end, and I can also just cut the frequencies and see if it sounds better or not, you know, and just sweep back and forth within that region. And there you go. Now, another very important tip that I have for you to get that pro sound is to always mix your instrument in the context of the mix, especially when it comes to EQ. Now, if this song was a singer-songwriter song, I would EQ that guitar differently than in a full production with a full band like I have right now. So if I listen to this guitar recording within the context of the mix, now my decisions are going to be quite different than if I EQ this guitar on its own. Now focus on the acoustic guitar. Sounds way better. If I listen to it on its own, might sound a bit too thin. Okay, so it's not necessarily a sound I would go for if I was mixing a singer-songwriter song, where there's only a voice and an acoustic guitar. I would do it differently. But within the context of the mix, this is how that guitar sounds the best for it to sit well in this mix. So there's nothing wrong on soloing a track when you mix, but always make your decisions in the context of the mix. Okay, now let's listen to these electric guitars. Okay, I'm gonna work on these, and this time around, I'm gonna use the bottom analog type knobs that we have. Now, those are designed to help you to enhance a sound by using your ears more than anything else. So there's no visual aspect apart from the knobs that you have, and that's it. And also the vocabulary that we have on top. So you want to get more thump or more warmth, you can add a bit more of this band of frequencies, okay? And the focus is going to be similar to a Q. So if you add more focus, it's going to focus more on those, that band of frequencies. If you bring the focus to 0 or less focus, it's going to affect more frequencies. So very similar to the Q. Now, the first band and the last band, if you bring the focus knob to 0, these two bands will act as a high boost shelf and a low boost shelf. But the minute you bring it up above 0, it's going to go back to a bell curve filter. So now within these frequency ranges, we have different characteristics that we can work with. Like, let's say I want to add a bit more tone to the this guitar. I can select the tone settings, or I can click and get the power settings, which is going to shift the center frequency a bit higher in this case. And same if I want to add a bit more attitude or more edge, more bite or more clarity, more presence or more brilliance, you know. So we have all those general terms again when we talk about EQ. So more air or more space. So it's actually a very good way to learn about EQ and to use your ears to determine what sounds warm or what needs a bit more presence or more bite or power, you know. So let's try this out on this electric guitar. And again, in the context of the mix. First thing I'm going to do here before going playing with the knobs, I'm going to add a high pass filter. All right, so let me add a bit of tone here, a bit of bite also. Sounds pretty good. What about the bit of edge or attitude? Let me just compensate by bringing down the output level. Okay, let's solo it. So that's before. A bit more clean, a bit more bright. You know, it has a bit more bite, exactly, you know, a bit more edge, I must say. And it does work pretty well in the context of the mix. Okay, so this is another way you can EQ a sound by just enhancing frequencies. And, you know, with this type of vocabulary you have on this plugin, that might help you to just get the sound that you're looking for by using your ears, you know, which is not a bad thing. Now, I'm going to go over a few other parameters that we have with this EQ, which are pretty nice. Every band will have a different way to EQ. So by default, the band will EQ the full stereo spectrum, but you can also, by clicking on this little icon, the stereo icon on top, you can choose for this band to only EQ the left side if you're EQing a stereo channel, or the right side, or the mid, you know, for mid-side processing, where you can EQ only the center of a stereo signal or the sides of a stereo signal. Okay, which can be pretty useful also. There's a graphic analyzer, a pre-analyzer, or a post-analyzer that you can activate or deactivate, and you can also get rid of this these vocabularies on top if you don't need them. Okay, but so it's a very nice EQ, and something special also with this EQ is the educational part, and not only on the EQ, but on what Björkvin offers when you put your hands on this EQ. So let me show you by going on the website. When you land on the website, you have like a lot of details about what this plugin is about, a quick overview of who Björkvin Benediktsson is, and you also have, which is pretty cool, more than the plugin. When you get the plugin, you have also an EQ strategies ebook that is included, and if you go to the second tier, you have a video training also, which is the ultimate audio issues EQ video course included in this package. Now the first tier goes out at $79, second tier at $97, but since you're watching this video, Björkvin was kind enough to give the Mixdown community 20% off if you're interested on getting this EQ. So I'm going to leave the link down below. Note that I'm not sponsored to make this video, but I have an affiliate link if you want to put your hands on this EQ and also support the channel at the same time. Everything is down below. You can also go check my EQ vocal strategies video that I have right here on this channel. Hope you enjoyed this video. If so, share, like, and subscribe to the channel. Leave your questions and comments down below. Until next time, take care, my friend, and see you.